rapper Young Thug. Police arrested more than 24 people, including the artist, and accused them of running a violent gang.
Young Thug RICO case has taken by most accounts an unusual twist, an alleged drug deal in open court.
I didn't know what the case was going to be about until I actually got to the courthouse. And I want to say, and I could be over-exaggerating, but we had to have had about 500 people. I know it was a full room of folks, and people were talking like, I think this is going to be the YSL case. Now, I had no idea what YSL was. My mind was oblivious. I mean, you know, I've traveled around the world, do my own thing.
Yeah.
And when it wasn't until we stepped out for lunch and came back and we saw the room filled with police officers, sheriff officers, everybody is there. And just at this, just like the table, I'm literally sitting in front of Jeffrey Williams. Like, we can literally look at each other eye to eye.
There were like red dog security in there, like some special unit police. How did that affect you guys?
It was like Fort Knox. Jurors, we parked in an undisclosed location. So we were briefed on our security, making sure that we were okay.
And if you ain't talking no dough, then I ain't interested. Look, they say the sky's the limit, I'm going farther than that. She keep blowing up my phone, so I called her mama, come get your daughter back. They just want a little bit of fame, get them boys whack. Wipe it, little one eye, bust your brain, better get a hard hat. They say the sky's the limit, I'm going farther. They can try to, but can't kill me. I'm immortal. I just bought a nigga life, as and did a side, come with that order. You lazy, the reason you broke, you don't know how to hustle. Don't try me, they know I'm stressed, son. Look, red rum, red dot. Hit the block when 12 come. Look, know I'm thugging to the fullest, asking for a bullet, cause he never felt one. Stick him to the wall, it's a nail gun. Riding with my dog, trying to nail something. Yeah. I said that on you when he got your partner too.
Yo, welcome to It's Up There podcast. I am your host for another episode of the fastest growing show in the world. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for clicking on this video. Today we're going to have a monumental conversation. What's your name anyway?
Jason.
Jason.
Yeah, you can call me.
Okay. I'm going to have a monumental conversation. What jury? Juror
56.
56.
56.
We're going to have a conversation with Juror 56. My guy Jason, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's good to hear from you. Move that mic in closer if you don't mind. Yeah, that's good.
I hear it. All right, perfect. I got you.
People hear you good. Number one, I want to thank you for sitting down with me today, joining me. I really appreciate your willingness to share your experience, you know, with the YSL Trial. Of course, millions of people were watching and are going to be watching this. So, number one, I want to thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me today, though. 100%.
100%. Tell me a little bit about yourself prior to being selected to be a juror on this trial.
My whole life, but like just me in general.
Yeah.
Born and raised in North Carolina, the Greensboro, the Triad area. And pretty much most people knew me from being in the political background. So I was a political fundraiser for a very, very long time.
Whoa, that's dope. That's interesting.
My job was to keep people in office.
Okay.
And so I raised their money. Some folks are still in office right now.
That you raised money for?
That I raised money for and or worked with them to some capacity. And I worked for major airlines, a flight attendant. And I also referee 2 sports, but I'm actually going to add a 3rd sport. I do football, men's football, women's flag football. I do men's, women's basketball, and then I'm going to actually add soccer to the table.
Wow.
So I like staying physically,
yes,
you know, in shape. And other than that, though, you know, from North Carolina, went to an HBCU.
Shout out.
North Carolina A&T State University, NCAT.
Shout out.
So I'm a full Aggie. Both my sisters are all Aggies as well. And other than that, though, just, you know, I grew up and moved around a lot of places for political reasons and things like that to help on campaigns. And now, just flying around the world, exploring what's around here.
Right. The political background is interesting. Fundraiser, especially, is interesting to me because in political, if we're talking about politics, they always speak to how there's corruption when it comes to money and fundraising and some of the bills and packages that are set forth What's your thought process about that, seeing you were in the inside? Is it as corrupt as people make it?
It's not as corrupt. I mean, there's a term, pay to play, that no one crosses that line. And as soon as that transaction is made, when someone donates to a political candidate or an organization for political reasons, then it goes into a different law as far as like the parameters around it. And it's not as corrupt as people may think it may be. I mean, there are good people out here. There are good politicians that are out here as well. I will say that I've never had a rude politician towards me at all.
Of course not. You're dealing with the money.
Dealing with the money, right?
Yes. Why would they be?
The office staff, they get a different side of the person. But other than that, though, I think that the fundraising side every year or every cycle goes up. And I can't remember. I think back when I was doing it, I think the limit was $2,500. That was per person.
Right.
And I'm sure that has gone up over time, of course, inflation and many other things. But all in all, I think that politicians, they're constantly having to raise money every single day.
Yes.
And if you're U.S. Congress, they're raising money literally once they get elected, they're back to fundraising again. So it takes a lot of money.
But why? Why? That's what I think. That's why I think the corruption comes in is the delegation of the money. It's like, where is the money going? Why does it take so much money to keep someone in office? Even like you said, following the win.
Right.
Seeing that you have a 4-year, 2-year, 1 year, whatever the term is, you still got to go right back boots on the ground.
You're paying staff. You're paying, but also money's going to the whatever political party you're with, to the national side. You're paying for campaign ads, maybe polling, depending on how big the race is. And the money just goes everywhere. But a vast majority of the money really comes not from individuals. And I know some politicians sometimes will say, well, hey, I'm different. I'm only accepting individual donors. But you do have corporations who do contribute PACs. And which is you get a lot of that from various businesses who want to contribute for special interests and also to have a seat at the table.
Right.
So when you go on to, if you're not familiar with Open Secrets, that's what I used to use back in the day.
Yes.
It shows you where all the money's coming from, who's contributing to what.
And you'll be interested when you look into these things.
Right.
Yeah. Even big pharma. There's so much. When you look into, like you say, some of these special interest groups that will get on the right side of what they believe to be history and start to kind of fund their Republican or their Democrat. How close in proximity would you work with the actual candidate back then?
I will answer. I pretty much worked with them firsthand. So I started off as an intern and then worked my way all the way up into being a director at a small firm.
Wow.
So I pretty much had a seat at the table where I was talking directly to the candidate and also the principal, as I used to put it, whether they were running for U.S. Congress and I've worked with a couple of governors. And pretty much I had conversations with them, especially when we're sitting down just like this.
Right.
And the whole term dollar for dollars, where you're sitting here, you give a list of names and you're calling these folks and, smoozing them and then, talking about all the things. And then they are hoping to contribute the max amount. And so I'm the one that makes sure I said, hey, we need to ask for $1,500. Hey, we need $2,500. And so sometimes they'll look at me like, people hate asking for money.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's not their money. It's going to a political cause. And then it trickles on down for certain things. I mean, I was refereeing just a basketball game, and this one particular, the guy I was working with on the court, his family owns a construction company. They help with the highway and do projects. Well, they pretty much will benefit on a state side. So you have some folks who give to an ideology versus the political field on the federal side.
Yes.
Then you also have folks who would contribute on the state side versus, projects or maybe certain things they want for their particular communities. So it varies depending on who what money that they probably plan on contributing to somebody. So.
Right, 100%. When you first got the news that you were selected to be a part of this YSL trial, where were you and what was your thoughts?
I was flying. and I checked the mail. Let me tell you this right now. I check my mailbox maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks. It's very, I mean, everything's like electronic.
Right.
So I went downstairs, opened the mailbox, and I see Fulton County jury summon, and I just sat there and looked at it, and I said, there's no way. How, out of all these years, I lived in various parts of the country, and I've had, got called for jury duty, and of course I got out of it because I was, out of the state on on assignment, but this time I'm physically in the state.
Right.
And I legit sat there and I was like, okay, then clearly this is my first time doing jury duty, so I got it, and I was just like, well, here we go. I guess I can't get out of it. And so I didn't know what the case was going to be about until I actually got to the courthouse. And I want to say, and I could be over-exaggerating, but we had to have had about 500 people. Well, I won't say 500 people, about 100 plus. I mean, I know it was a full room of folks, and people were talking like, I think this is going to be the YSL case. Now, I had no idea what YSL was.
Right.
My mind was oblivious. I mean, I travel around the world, do my own thing.
Yeah.
And when it wasn't until we stepped out for lunch and came back and we saw the room filled with police officers, sheriff officers, everybody is there. And just at this, just like the table, I'm literally sitting in front of Jeffrey Williams. Like, we can literally look at each other eye to eye.
Yeah.
And so that's when I knew that, okay, this is the case that people were actually talking about. And I'm like, and still was oblivious to know what was going on.
Right. So did you know he was Young Thug, or you just knew this is the guy, or what did you know when you looked at him?
I just saw him, I figured that was just Young Thug. I mean, I think that's what people said, it's on the news, but I just didn't know who he was.
Right.
And so.
Which is good. I mean, I think it makes you a supreme candidate for something like that, to kind of be blind.
But I was
about
trying to get out
who
of it, though.
You were? but they wouldn't let you.
From my understanding, the jurors talked about this at the very end. They had different, of course, backup jurors. But I think the common denominator, that the reason we were selected, one, because we fit as a candidate for what they needed, what both sides agreed to,
right,
as well as our jobs paid us, because how many jobs are going to pay their employees for a long period of time?
I didn't think about that. Right.
And that was a big thing.
Yes. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so we were just figuring out, because some people were talking, like, how in the world we get selected? Because some people try to get out of it, like myself, and I thought I was going to get dismissed from it.
Right.
But that was a common denominator. I think that most of us came to a consensus that our jobs were going to pay us during that long extended time.
Were there other people who wanted to be in it? Like, yeah, I want to be like, this is the YSL
I think so.
trial.
Yeah. I believe there were a few people who wanted to be inside of it. I mean, they either, you have folks, because now, I'm a transplant in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm the one that helps contribute to the traffic that everybody can say.
Right, when they say stop moving. Right.
So there are folks who are from Atlanta, Georgia, and of course, this is history in the making, and so they were fine and they wanted to be there in that case, though. So, they talked about it. They knew more information about who he was, because maybe their kids, or they might have heard his music here and there, because the questionnaire was another thing.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stats projections, like you'll pick Patrick Mahomes for up to 2 passing touchdowns, or Saquon Barkley for more than 60 yards, and you watch the winnings roll in. I've been using Prize Picks, and it's just so simple. I can make my picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. That's just 1 minute. And the withdrawals, it makes the experience even better. After you win, you definitely don't want to wait. And don't miss out on Taco Tuesdays. That's where selected player projections are discounted up to 25%. Go to prizepicks.com, use my code IUTP to receive a guaranteed $50 when you play just $5. Again, that's prizepicks.com, my code IUTP. If you support the show, sign up for Prize Picks, use my code, and watch the winnings roll in. This is daily fantasy sports made easy. Salute to Prize Picks for supporting the movement, and let's get back to the episode.
I'll help. I'm the one that helps contribute to the traffic that everybody can say.
Right, when they say stop moving.
Right. So there are folks who are who are from Atlanta, Georgia. And of course, this is history in the making. And so they were fine and they wanted to be there in that case though. So, you know, they talked about it, you know, I mean, they knew more information about who he was because, you know, maybe their kids or they might have heard his music here and there because, you know, the questionnaire was another thing.
Right. Let's get into that. Like, what were the questions when they?
The questions that the question they ask you sometimes, you know, do you know anybody who's been convicted of any crime? Your opinion towards the police officers or police department. Have you ever been in trouble with the law? Ask you for your political view. And I remember from my political view, you know, I'm a fair person. I mean, I worked in the business for a long time. I tell people I don't care what aisle you're on, as long as you can explain why you support something. So and I put NA by that. They ask you for your political affiliation. They ask you about the death penalty. They ask you what movies do you like to watch.
Goodness.
I mean, it was
strenuous.
Extraneous.
Yeah.
It was a 100 questionnaire that's going to take you an hour to complete.
100 questions.
100 questions. And I remember literally, and it was like a thick piece of paper, front and back. And if I'm not mistaken, front and back, and they had you to write things out. So it took me maybe about 45 minutes to 50 minutes to do mine. So I write in cursive because some things I'm just like, I'm not answering this. I mean, why do you need to know this? They ask you for your social media. And so it's things like that. I ask you for Facebook, Instagram, and I put NA. I was like, why? But there's a reason why I need to know those things. But if anything, people can find you if they really want to start talking.
I mean, yeah, I think that's, we're in a digital age. The footprint is there. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't think anyone can hide from it at this point.
Correct.
But that's crazy. 100 questions. Were any about Young Thug?
Not specifically. I think what they did was they
rap music, rap lyrics,
I think,
stuff like
asked
that.
About music, what type of music that she listened to, and I listen to like all kinds of music. I mean, I told people, my friends know how to trip me up really fast. Is that I'm horrible with naming an artist. I'm horrible with it.
But if you hear the tune, I've heard that.
Yes. I'll tell them, I say, oh yeah, I heard this before. Right. And that's how it was in the courtroom when the songs came on. I can't remember what it was. I was like, oh, he sings this song. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And so you try your best. I mean, I think we joked about it once before. You wanted to tap your feet and do so because the beat was so good.
Yeah.
And you had to sit there.
Yeah, and we're gonna definitely get into some of those moments because I think it was so many moments that I want to get into. But the jury selection process, there were a few people that went to jail. I think he locked someone up for 3 days because they were caught recording the jury selection process.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, someone went to jail.
I didn't know this because it's like a lot of things now I'm starting to hear, and I had no idea because we were pretty much told not to watch.
That's what I was going to ask you. Because there's certain things that was happening in court that I said if the jury sees that it changes the way they view things. And I was always interested in that. But yeah, there was a juror that actually went to jail for 3 days for some I think for recording the actual jury selection process where you got 500 people in there. And you also mentioned about the security being heightened.
Correct.
I spoke with Doug Weinstein last week. He said for the first couple of weeks in trial, there were like red dog security in there, like some special unit police. How did that affect you guys?
It's a little different, but see, working in politics, I'm used to dealing with Secret Service or used to dealing with Capitol Police Office, those who protect the principals. So it wasn't anything different, but every day it was like Fort Knox. The jurors, we parked in an undisclosed location. We were shuttled to the courthouse in an unmarked vehicle. That was actually like,
whoa, that was the president stuff. Yeah.
And so, that was our whole process. And so then, we were checked to make sure that we were good and make sure we weren't bringing anything that we weren't supposed to bring to the courthouse. And then, of course, you're looking into the courtroom and you see the sheriff officers and other folks inside the courtroom. Now, from what I'm not sure what we saw, what was on the outside of the courtroom,
right?
But I'm sure that they stood armed at the at the doors to make sure that people were following, what they needed to do. So, there was no mishaps or anything, but it was like Fort Knox coming in.
But I'm wondering, how does that play on the psyche of the juror? Like, whoa, what case are we in? Like,
I know
we dealing with some monster. Like, are they alleging that someone's trying to like hurt us or harm us?
I'll say during the selection process, when we got selected, we were taken into the jury room, and we had the head security of the courthouse. I think it was a female. And so they were going over, okay, make sure you all are being safe. Let us know if something's out of the ordinary, let us know. So we were briefed on our security, making sure that we were okay.
Does that affect the way you view Young Thug, though?
No.
Because I believe that some of this stuff, right, you can have some lawyer that may try to argue that some of this could kind of sway how you feel about, like, the case. I mean, they wouldn't do that for a regular trial. I mean, I understand it's high priority, high class trial, but sneaking us in and like unmarking us to the building, it's like that's extreme. It's intense. I mean, I would think like, is my life in danger? Like,
well, I think that was some of the questions. I think that some jurors did feel that way.
Yeah.
And as time went on, you got a chance to see people's personality. Now, we couldn't talk to the jurors. I mean, we couldn't talk to any of the defendants in that courtroom,
right?
The individuals. We just saw the attorneys. We see everybody inside there. But you start to see the smile. You start to see folks laid back. Of course, you start to. Well, I did. I can't speak on behalf of the other jurors, but as time went on, I won't say it got relaxed, but you got a chance to see people's personalities. And so, but of course, at first, people might have been on edge, and so that's just come part of people's psyche,
right?
About how they were thinking,
right? And I mean, they had a way they were looking at this trial before they even got it off the ground. I mean,
correct.
like Doug was saying, with the big officers in there, like maybe 2 months in, they figure out, we can get out of here.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? No one's coming to break Young Thug out.
Correct.
Like, there's not gonna be SEAL Team 6 that's gonna try to. This is very exaggerated.
Correct.
Here, right? These people are doing a job that is worth making sure that security is in place, right? But it seems a bit extreme.
It was extreme, and then looking at it from a different perspective, I get it that you want to keep people safe, but at the same time, I'm just curious. I'm curious to know how much money was spent on this case in general.
Right.
How much of the tax dollars were going towards this one particular trial.
Right.
And I respect law enforcement, but at the same time, was it needed to that extreme?
Exactly. And we respect law enforcement, right? But we want to have a real conversation. And you coming from the political world, you know that sometimes we have to have uncomfortable conversations
Correct.
about where the money's allocated,
Correct.
where it's going, and how you guys are handling the things we should be benefiting from, right? Because these kind of cases should be laid out in a way that makes sense and justifies the money being spent.
Correct.
Right? When you get into the trial and say, we're still being shuttled in here 9 months in, and this case doesn't really even look like it should look when we're looking at this alleged criminal.
Correct.
When we come from the first day, right? Because we're gonna be just all around.
Oh yeah,
here, right? Yeah. So the first day when you hear opening statements, do you have any preconceived notions prior to those opening statements? Did anyone sway you with opening statements? Did you have anything to look forward to? What was your feeling when it came to first day opening statements?
My feelings were like, I tell people I'm a fact person. I love facts. Your emotions, and it's probably the Aquarian side of being, as far as being in January, your emotions kind of go out the door. So give me the facts. Let me know. Let me draw my own conclusion, or let me follow the story as you're telling it to me. And so I didn't have a pre-notion, and I mentioned once before in my series, I said, I fly for a living. And so when I'm traveling around the world, I can't judge a person when they're coming on an aircraft because I don't know who they are. And so that is how I treated the opening statements. I sat there, the state presented its case, and they were sharing, this is what was happening and this is what we should look for. And then the defense team came up as well. So I was all ears, because now you're forced to take my time. I have to sit in this room for X amount of time. And so I always kept an open mind, especially during the opening statements. And so nothing got lost in translation. It was just a fact of, you are bringing down a lot of information, and you're giving us, this is what we should look for. And I always maintain that integrity of, I want to make sure that I am fair. I want to make sure that I'm attentive, and I want to make sure that whatever you're presenting to me, that I am going to follow what you tell me, and then let me form my own personal opinion after that. So that's how I looked at it.
Right. What were some of the things they were asking you to look for?
Well, they laid out a blueprint. I mean, the defense was mostly saying that a lot of inconsistencies. And that is something that I can agree with. There's a lot of inconsistencies without having enough evidence. And like I said, this trial was just so long. It was just, you're plowing a lot of information to retain.
Yes.
The state, however, which I mentioned before, is that they're pretty much going after the big fish. And that's something that we heard a few times from different folks. In the courtroom, you have Jeffrey Williams at the very top, and he's the big fish. And so that is what, he was like the leader of the pack.
Yes, that's how they said it.
That's how they said it. And that's what the state had brought up. And so they're saying that, you have a wolf pack, and Jeffrey is
King Slime, they call it.
Pretty much, though, yes. And then I looked at it, and then everybody else was like kind of like the minions.
Right.
And so whatever he said, this is what they did. And that's how they had painted him as.
Right.
And I'm usually a first name based person. I will call him Young Thug, but I'm actually a first name person.
For sure.
I tell people call me, I'm just too personal. I'm always personal. So that's the reason why. I hope he doesn't get offended if I'm calling him by Jeffrey or.
Nah, you were one of the ones that were fairly looking at his life. I don't think I don't think he could possibly have a problem with being called his government name. It's his real name.
It's a real name, yeah. It's like sometimes I refer to him as Young Thugs, but I respect him for who he is and his art. I don't know him personally. I've never, until I saw him in court. But one of the other things that I respected about him was when you listen to some of the witnesses that came up, and people consistently refer to him, Mr. Williams, Mr. Williams, Mr. Williams. And that stuck out to me really clear, because I was saying, okay, then so the witnesses who coming up there who've been subpoenaed by the state, they respect who he is.
Yes.
They didn't call him Jeffrey. They didn't call him Jeff. They call him sometimes Young Thug, but mostly Mr. Williams.
Right.
And that right there helped paint a picture.
Right.
Because you can, and not saying that I didn't have any conclusion about him at all. It was just a fact of certain small details play a role.
Exactly, because that's what you're looking for. Correct. You're looking for, okay, they're asking me to kind of judge this scenario, so I'm looking for some indicators.
Correct.
Right, especially outside of what both of these people who are presenting the case are saying. What are some other things that can speak to me? Correct. Right, they can make me see maybe personality. Am I dealing with a ruthless King Slime, or am I dealing with a guy who was a rapper that got caught up from a neighborhood that helped some people and now is in an unfortunate circumstance? Correct. Now, looking over the case, your experience in this trial, how do you, if you had to give a grade to the state on how they presented the case, what would you give them?
My grade I give the state, I'll most likely probably give it a C. And the reason why, I'll say this though, I don't necessarily think that District Attorney Love should have taken charge on this particular case. I believe that it should have been Simone. And I even, even at the very end, when the attorneys came to the back of the room on both sides after the verdict was read, and I told them directly in front of everybody, I said, you should have taken the lead on this case. Only because I think that her presentation style was a lot better. It was almost like a professor. And not saying that it would have swayed the verdict any other way. It was just the fact of sometimes folks can be too close to something that they want something out of it, but they mess it up themselves.
So do you think Ms. Love, attorney DA Love, came off as, I want Thug?
Yes, I believe that's what as time went on, that is what I started to see. It was a
now,
trend.
when did that switch? Because see, this is what I'm interested in, right? I want to get into the peaks and valleys, because I would imagine over this long process of trial, there's some times where you're leaning towards Thug side, and there's some times where, now the state's making a little sense here. You know what I'm saying? It's like these back and forths. What was a spot where let's talk about love, then we'll get to some of the other spots. But what was a spot where you said, okay, this is starting to seem like she's personally involved and emotionally involved in this?
There was two situations. It was a young lady who was a mother. I can't remember her name at the top of my head, but they brought her in handcuffs in a jumpsuit. I think that was the one that they had reached out to her and wanted her to come in, and they felt like that she was a threat and made up leaving. But and also I think she was the one that around the holidays that District Attorney Love reached out to her, and then the conversation kind of switched. And here she was away from her kids. Now, I don't know her background, I don't know anything about her, but one thing I do know is that we saw her in handcuffs coming in with a jumpsuit on. And then the next day we saw her in regular clothes. And to me, that was insensitive. I'm sitting there saying to myself, what was the reason why you had to put her in handcuffs to be able to sit here behind the stand and give a case? Also, there was a young guy who was already in prison. They took him out of jail, came in, and he had his jumpsuit on as well. And he pretty much said, I don't want to be here, but I'm forced to be here. And I think that was when the guy, he was involved in a situation where is that somebody shot the other guy in the head.
Yes.
And crossed the car.
Yes.
And I sat there and I'm saying to myself, okay, I get it, what you're trying to do, but what does it have to do anything? And then you have, and it could be a psychological thing, I don't know, but you have a books on top of other documents asking all these questions. And at the very beginning, I was more, okay, if someone's not cooperative, then you have every right to, bulldoze and everything's off the table.
Right.
But I started seeing a trend that I didn't like. And that's when I began to say, okay, this is too personal.
Yes.
You're not letting up. There's a point when you have to have some kind of decency. And mind you, social media plays a huge role. We see things. I never saw anything, but it was just about how it's communicated out to public. It's like how, I get it that you want to do your job and you're doing your job, but where's the human side of you to where it's that, okay, then they don't want to be here, so how can you better communicate?
Right.
Whereas that when Simone was up there, she was able to connect with the witnesses, and she was able to talk with them,
right.
to communicate back with her. Some of the witnesses, they were on edge when District Attorney Love came up.
Yeah.
You can tell they didn't respect her as much. But then when Simone comes up, they're a little bit more ease.
Right.
And she's able to talk to them.
Right. That common theme of, I don't want to be here, because I think the witness you're talking about, he's like, yo, I'm already doing my time. I'm in chain gang, man. I'm supposed to be in chain gang. He just kept saying that.
Correct.
And so people are watching this, and this is where it starts to feel like coercion.
Is it coercion?
Coercion.
Coercion.
Yeah.
Coercion.
Yes. That's when it starts to feel like coercion, is that, okay, because I'm going to get to this with Woody, right?
Correct.
Because Woody was a scenario where, okay, matter of fact, let's get into it now. No, let's save Woody, because Woody is a lot. Because I don't want to skip into Woody. Woody is a lot. So, but for the guy who we're talking about, with who they brought from jail, I think it speaks volumes when they dangle the immunity in their face like that, right? When it's like, yo, today they have on a jumpsuit, tomorrow they're in regular clothes. What happened?
Correct.
How did that happen?
I think, and that's like the other part. That's the reason why I spoke about education. Like I now is a time for people, in today's society, to make sure they complete school and get the learning that they need. Because
yes.
I felt like, and going through the judiciary system, and I'm seeing that folks committed a crime, but the state pretty much owns them for X amount of time.
Crazy.
And that right there shocked me. Now, that could be me being naive, but it was just a common factor, because when you're signing your name on a dotted line and you get X amount of years, X amount of time, the state owns you. So they can, like with that particular individual, they can go and get you from the jail and say, hey, we need you to come testify because you have some kind of connection to something.
Right. And oftentimes they play that game with you, right?
Correct.
So like, let's say they need you to testify, and they did this in the YSL trial where they'll come lock you up a few days before they need you to testify.
Correct.
So they know where your location is. Like, we know where he's at.
Correct.
And we're going to force him to come in here. I just don't see how Attorney Love or the state felt like bringing in witnesses that were going to get up there and say, I don't want to be here, would resonate with a jury.
Correct. I mean, and it's different if it's, off camera and they, it was a closed court. I think that it would probably been something a little different. But because like we saw that in some of the interrogation videos where it's that folks will say one thing, but then of course you get in front of a courtroom and in front of a jury, now it's just like everything you say pretty much can be held against you.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. So I agree with you. I mean, I don't know if to me, I don't understand. Maybe the state did, maybe they did not vet the individuals before coming in. Now, of course, they can't. I mean, I'm not an attorney, so they know what to do and they cannot do. But still, you have individuals come inside, and how do you expect for them to side with you and feel like they're going to tell the court what you possibly want them to say?
Corroborate your story, yeah.
Correct. And there's a difference between using their words and then also using their words to be able to get the point across. It's up to you can't speak on behalf of somebody. Man. And they're not going to sit up here and not saying I'm not telling the truth, but they're not going to sit up here and give you what you want, even if it's like immunity.
Right.
I mean, you have, it's almost like I said before, there's street smarts and there's book smarts.
Yes. And
folks were doing what was best for them. And so I don't know if the state vetted them beforehand or not. I'm very curious about that.
Right, me too. Let me ask you this. Did you or any other jurors take note to like the Brian Steele and Miss Love back and forth, so all of the commotion in court? Because it had some heated moments in front of y'all. Like there was a lot happening where sometimes you'd be like, uh-oh.
So it was this running joke because when District Attorney Love went up, because she always wanted to approach the bench. When she approached the bench, you had pretty much the whole defense team come up there. And you just see, and it was so funny because and I remember we're sitting here and I remember the juror, because as time went on and you start saying to yourself, okay, everything's running smooth. There's no hiccups.
Yes.
But something, I think, it's almost like this brother and sister fight. They really don't like each other. And I don't know their relationship to this day. I don't know. But I'm assuming.
She's trying to bury, Brian Steele looks at Young Thug like a son.
Right.
Like they're really close. So she's trying to bury someone that, in all intents and purposes, Brian Steele is saying, this innocent guy. Right? Like, so he took that very personal.
Yeah, but those two, it will go smoothly. And as soon as, I think she'll say something slick. And then all of a sudden you start hearing the objection, and then Attorney Steele will just stand up, and it was a chess match. It was fun to watch at first, but became annoying after a while because you knew that at some point someone was going to flip.
Yeah.
And both of their voice, District Attorney Love, her voice carries. She doesn't need a microphone; it carries.
Yes.
And those two go at it, and then when Judge Glanville, I think he used to be in the military, I think himself, it's all three shouting.
Yes.
And you're sitting here, it's like a ticking bomb that's about to go off.
Yeah.
You're sitting there going like, oh my gosh. There was never a dull moment when it came down to those two.
Right.
And the eye rolling, I think when when Attorney Steele was sitting down or standing up, he kind of at the front or whatever, he just sits back, he's like, he's turning red, he's like patting his leg, and then
so are you guys as jurors watching all of that?
We're watching everything.
Yeah.
We're watching every movement, all the laughs, all the the sarcasm. We're watching everything.
Did it ever feel like, because Attorney Love, outside of the jury's presence for a number of reasons, were brought to the table for, I guess, trying to influence you guys with, heavy breathing or, looks and eye rolls and certain things where she was basically trying to get according to the defense, he was trying to get people in the jury box to agree with her sentiment. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like, what is that? That's not what it is. You know what I'm saying? And those kind of things. Were you guys affected by that? Or?
Well, yeah, I think I wasn't affected by it because, my mind, was, just following the facts the entire time. But I do think that with some of the other jurors, they probably were siding with some of the emotional connections that was being thrown out.
Yes.
And I say that because I'm sitting, as time went on, I sat in the middle of the jury box. So I'm looking to the left, to the right, I see, my colleagues around me. And some folks, might have been swayed by some of the emotional standpoint of it. And even during the deliberations, some things popped up or some people were siding with based on whatever, and from their perspective. But yes, it didn't sway me. I'm sure for other jurors, they probably pay close attention to it. It was pretty much somewhat split.
Yeah. Was it loud though? Did it feel like she's doing that? She's doing that so you can hear. You know how sometimes you may go to a restaurant or you may notice, man, this person is doing this, like trying to get some attention. Or did it feel like they were actually legally sparring, or did it feel like she actually was trying to get you guys to see from her standpoint?
I think probably from her standpoint, because how the room was set up. We had the jury box, which let's say this table. The state literally was right in front of us. We can literally reach over and touch almost them from where they were. And then the whole defense team was on the other side, so they were further away from us. So of course you're going to look at what's closer to you, and so that's District Attorney Love and Simone and in the states, they were all sitting right there. So you saw more of their facial expressions.
Right.
But when it came down to defense, off into the back, sometimes you will see Attorney Steele. He will like I said, he'll just grab his face, he'll turn red. You can see him turning red from a distance. You'll see Attorney Adams doing the same exact thing. He'll roll his eyes. I mean, you can see those things, and it was just something that I don't think it was a good strategy because in the end, the emotions really just was out the door, to some degree.
Yes.
So.
When you look at Miss Love, right, and what she was doing, there was a moment where they took her out of the courtroom where it's like, yo, she's not showing up as much. Do you think that was a little too late?
And I won't say it was late. I just think that she, Fannie, I think it's
Fannie Willis.
Yeah, Fannie Williams, the district attorney, she should not have put her on this case. Period. I think that it was a bad move. I think that District Attorney Love could have done some things behind the scenes and kind of help with her colleagues, but you got to know your audience. Some people resonate really well with others, and so I think that if it was a smaller group of individuals or something else, then she might have done well. But on this magnitude, I don't necessarily think that she was a good fit. And yes, we did start seeing her not there as much, but Simone should have taken it. I think flat out Simone should have been the lead person on this particular case, and I told her directly. So, District Attorney Love.
What were their reaction when you said that to them?
Well, the state has to remain,
steadfast. Yeah.
But I'm very vocal, and which people know. I'm very vocal, become very vocal as time went on, and I'm assuming that they probably agree with me, and even defense team, they probably said, hey, we probably would have had a better fight had it been Simone,
right?
But at the end of the day, everybody had a job and course to do that.
Yes.
And so, but it was just District Attorney Love. It was just this was not the case that she should have been on.
What? Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's thinking about all of that. It's like, that is so.
Well, because the case could have been, I think this could have been a shorter length of time. I think that we were told that it was going to be 6 months, maybe 9 months. I was going for 6 months at the minimum and possibly go to 9 months because I was trying to get about it.
Yeah.
I have a life. Look,
yes, for sure.
I enjoy my life.
For sure.
And which I'll talk about in my series and whatever. But at the same time, people don't understand the mental toll that it plays.
That's
you
what
are
we're
going
talking
into a
about.
room and you're being controlled when to leave. We're there from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. If we have court, unless we have come half a day. So if Simone had presented in her style of presentation, she's more of a lecturer to students or a professor. And it makes sense. It just flows.
Yes.
When it came to District Attorney Love, it was just like it kept prolonging and prolonging and prolonging. And at some point, you want to scream because it's like, how long are you going to hold us hostage? And then my political cap comes on.
Yeah.
And I'm saying to myself, we're not on trial here.
Yeah.
So what point are you trying to, is your strategy is to squeeze money out of Jeffrey Williams and others to where it's that this will force their hand down to where it's that, okay, you can't go anymore because, and it's a good strategy, but you have to understand that you have the jury that's up here who's losing their entire life.
Yes.
They can't do anything.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many jurors had to reschedule doctor's appointments. Some people had, it was one juror had a vacation plan. And so they asked me, they said, Jason, what do you think I should do? I said, well, do you have trip insurance? And they said, no, because that juror was going to travel with their family for an entire month or 2 months over in Europe. Scratched the whole entire thing off. There's countless stories. So the frustration that District Attorney Love brought had a massive, not saying massive way of how we decided on the trial, but this case could have been shorter than what it was had Simone had presented it from her perspective. Because District Attorney Love, it was just everywhere. It was just like she kept going every single day. It kept getting longer and longer and longer, and it's just
it was too much.
Too much.
Yeah. What was your position with the jury? I know they have like certain different positions and things like that. Did you hold a position with the jury?
I didn't hold a position, but surprisingly, I was never supposed to be the foreman at all.
You wasn't.
I wasn't.
Okay.
I remember that maybe the first day or the first week, one of the jurors said, and we were all sitting down in the room, it was like a rectangular shape, and we had all 18, because we had 6 alternates during the time. The juror said, well, if you all don't mind, I would like to be the foreman. Now, my ego side,
Right.
My ego side was like, okay.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be the foreman because, I like to get stuff done.
Yes.
I like to keep things flowing,
Yes.
and so I said, one thing, maybe this is God trying to tell me, take your hands off a little bit, don't do anything.
Yeah.
And so my position was just regular jury.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until the very end, and you get to know each other's personalities, and I respect all the jurors. I really do. There were some tense moments that, not physical altercation, but some wording altercation took place.
Like what? Let's talk about
those.
we don't have to get into the specifics of them, but I want to know what it's like in a trial of this magnitude with those conversations.
You get to be a family. So you get to pretty much, you become close. We were together for a year.
Yeah.
And personalities can't, I will say that for us to be that close, I will say that if there were, when there were incidents, people solved them.
Right. And we would expect that. My more so thing is I wanted to know, let's just say, for example, Jason is saying the lyrics is a no-go. They don't even corroborate what's going on. But Ashley is saying, well, but I kind of think that the lyrics do mean, what they're saying, right? I want to know about those discussions and how maybe they were worked out.
Well, it boiled down to, for deliberation, it always boiled down to 3 people were holding things up.
Wow.
And what I will say, which I'll talk about later, at some other point in time, is we were supposed to have a verdict the day before we actually delivered the verdict. I was trying to have that done by that day.
Right.
It boiled down to one person. And when I tell you I was so pissed. Here I am, because here I was, we're sitting down and we're getting, how it's almost like whipping the votes. And so so I back up for a moment. I remember when we heard the closing arguments, I spoke to one of the jurors who is one of the senior folks in that group, colleagues, whatever. And I looked at her and I said, I'm going to be the foreman. I said, the person who wanted to be the foreman, there's no way, only because of private discussions of other topics that kind of got people upset here and there. We respected that person, but the fact is that it was just a clash. I was like, I think I got
racial clash?
Not racial, it was just more of disagreements. Because if I'm looking at it from like I said, from a fact and also from a political view.
Right.
If you piss off this person, it's a domino effect, and you lose 3 or 4 people, and it's going to go, no matter what that person said, it's going to automatically go towards, we're going to go against you. And I didn't want that. So that's the reason why.
So you politicking.
I did.
Yes.
This is probably the first time the jurors will probably actually hear about this though. But that's what I did. I knew people's personalities, and I felt, but the 3 individuals that it boiled down to, I did not build a better relationship with them. Everybody else in the room, I did.
Right.
And I did not know how they were going to think. They were quiet, they were to themselves, and I pretty much didn't have my cards in a row. So I had to rely on other jurors to be able to bridge that relationship and to be able to talk things through. But it always boiled down to 3 individuals and sometimes 4, but mostly 3. And then the day the verdict was read, like I previously said, we were supposed to have a verdict the day before, but the one individual wanted to go home and go to sleep on it. Yes. When I tell you, I was literally upset. I was so upset. I said, there's no way. I said, God, come on, please. I can't take it anymore.
And I'm gonna go sleep on it.
I remember going home and just venting, because I was just like, we gotta come back here one more day. And when we got back in, I remember the van ride was quiet. No one said a word. I sat in the very back of the van. We got to the courthouse. We sat down, and I turned and looked at the individual, and I said, okay, where do you stand? And so then we had our votes, and we had a verdict probably within 15, 20 minutes before we even, like when we got to the courtroom.
Right.
And so that was that. I remember handing it to the sheriff officer, rung the bell or whatever, and he comes inside and he said, "You all done?" I said, "Yes, we're done."
Yeah.
But it boiled down to 3.
So what basically, for people who don't know how this process works, these 3 people are saying guilty, and the other people are saying not guilty.
So what I did,
what are the?
So what I did was when I whipped the votes, meaning that I pretty much came up there, got on the board. I said, okay, we have a column for guilty, undecided, and not guilty. Those are the 3 columns I had.
Okay.
I literally asked everybody, because we're going to do it in a diplomatic way. I said, raise your hand if you find individuals guilty. And that's how I would have done had people not taken a plea deal. We would have done the same exact thing. And I said, as of today, as of right now, where do you stand? Because I want to know what the numbers are. Because my whole goal was to get the undecided to either guilty or not guilty.
Makes sense.
And so that's what we did. And so you had people raise their hand for guilty. Then we had a few numbers for undecided. Then we had individuals who said not guilty. Once we did all that, people saw the numbers where they were. Then we had a discussion. For each indictment, we went through each one. And we had to, and those who found them guilty, which, like I said, had folks not taken the plea deal, would have had the same exact thing. I want you to explain to me, why do you find this person guilty? Because sometimes if the number tipped over, if you had, because you need, what, it's 12?
I think it's 12 jurors, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm trying to do math
12.
in my head.
Yeah.
If we had 7 on not guilty, and the remaining is in guilty, then people who say that they're that is guilty, I need you to explain to me why we need to get, like, I needed one column to be more than the other.
Right. So we have a decision. Yes.
I did not want to, but if we had undecided, we started there. If anybody was undecided, they had to explain why they find.
I think that's interesting. Now, is that traditionally how things work, or is that the process you implemented?
That's the process that I implemented.
I think that is so interesting because usually in those, I would imagine that you can say not guilty, guilty, and just stand on it. You don't really have to run back through in your mind like, hold on.
Correct. Well, there were times when people did, had to refresh their memory on certain things, but I felt like it was the most diplomatic way, and it kind of helped guide us through to stay on track.
Now, are you guys back there with the videos, the papers, so you could, what kind of notes were you taking as a juror? Like, so if you could go to, hey, the Woody interrogation video at 45:06, he said this, which doesn't make sense with what the state said here, right? Were you taking extensive notes, and did all of you guys have a lot of notes? When you're in the jury room deliberating, what's back there? Is it a TV? Is there videos? Is it interrogations? What's back there?
We only were able to, they only gave us documents, physical papers, and also any, what do you call it? Like poster boards, anything they had.
Okay, the exhibits.
Exhibits,
yes.
Exhibits.
Yes.
Anytime we needed to watch a video, we had to put it in a writing form to give it to a sheriff officer to give it to the judge. They had to get everybody into the courtroom. We could not watch a video on our own.
What?
Yes. So that was why it was a process. So if a juror was saying, well, hey, I need to see a video on, the shooting, we had to submit that in, and then we had pretty much trying to be more specific.
Right.
And so literally, that's when you saw us go back into the courtroom.
Just to watch a video.
Just to watch a video. And so I didn't want to waste my time or anyone else's time. I said, listen, anything that you need, we need to put it all on a piece of paper now. Well, I want to put it on everything on one sheet of paper to get delivered to the judge so that when we do go inside there, we can watch it and not keep going in and out. Because to me, that's just too much. I'm all about efficiency.
Right.
And so that's how it was. Any documents, some people were going through some of the documents that they had and reading through and everything, but any videos, any voice recordings, that's jail calls, we had to submit it in.
Makes sense though, because they want to, as Brian Steele and the defense and the state, they want to make sure you're actually hearing the right call or seeing the right video, because I can slide a video in there to the deliberation room that never made it into the courts, right?
And the defense did a good job. I think this was their part, that they did not want for us to have the transcript. I think they didn't want. I think it was the defense team, because they want us to listen to what they had to say. So of course the state will say this is what they're saying, but of course you're trying to listen to the jail call or what they're trying to say. I wished we had something in our hand, and I think a couple of times they did that, where it's that during the jail calls, because some of the audio was kind of off a little bit. It was kind of hard to hear, and we had a couple of folks who were senior. They had a hard time hearing what was going on. They're like, sometimes, and that's when we go back to the deliberation room, where they say, well, I think I heard this. This is what I got. And then people looking through their notes and saying, no, this is what was said.
Right.
So we had the microphone literally in front of us that blasted out in front of us so that some people can actually hear. Clearly the state had allowed that to happen, but we didn't have a physical document to see a transcript of what individuals were saying.
Yes. Right. Let me ask you this. The jury was made up of what kind of individuals?
There were mostly black people. There were maybe two white for the 12 jurors with all 18 or all 18 of us beforehand. It was pretty much diverse. Mostly you had women, you had folks who were in we had an accountant, we had someone who worked in the government area, you had a couple of teachers, you had folks who worked for different carriers, or whether it's a phone company or trucking company. It was pretty diverse.
Yeah.
It was diverse.
Right. Old, young.
Both. The oldest person actually, And we felt bad for her. I felt bad for her because the running joke was, I'm going to go through 2 birthdays and 2 pay raises on this court case.
Wow.
But of course, when you turn 70, you are excused from jury duty. And the oldest person actually turned 70 while in the court case.
Wow.
And so she pretty much asked and told them, they said, listen, I'm going to be 70. And they said, you still have to fulfill your jury duty. You're not 70 just yet. When she turned 70, she asked to get off the court case. They would not let her get off the case.
Wow. That was strenuous process.
Very strenuous process.
Man.
And I think the youngest person was...
And that's an old person. It's like, yo, let me go home.
Correct.
Yes. Wow.
There was 2 people who were close. I say the oldest ones have to have been between 65 and maybe 60 and 70, because I'm not sure the other, but somewhere around that group. And the youngest one was probably about 18.
18. So do you think, wow, that was an 18-year-old juror, somewhat young in
that
ballpark.
The youngest one got off.
Wow.
The youngest one was able to get off.
Okay.
So, for a reason that actually made sense, though.
Okay. Do you think people were culturally aware, like they understood what rap lyrics? Because I think that was a fear of our culture, right? A lot of us that's in this industry and in the business was like, hey, yo, rap lyrics is on trial. Like, they actually have lyrics, and they're wrong. This is what was interesting because, and we'll get to Glanville in the second part of this, but when he allowed lyrics to come in, right, it's almost like, okay, who's culturally aware enough in the jury box to know that, number one, rappers lie, right?
That's correct.
That's number one. Number two, he could be speaking about some alleged crimes in his raps as well. We don't just want to shun that off.
Correct.
But there is some parameters there. You do need to understand that everything that comes out of rappers' mouth is not truth. What did the jury feel like when they let 17 articles of lyrics into the courtroom?
Well, yeah, some people are fully aware of rap music, and then others may not know certain things, and or certain lingos that was in there, and some, including myself, though. I mean,
yeah, because some of this stuff don't make sense. Like, even when I hear it,
and I'm a staunch person on freedom of speech.
Yes,
and so I personally said in my mind that if you were to put the lyrics in part of this court case, I'm not going to go by that, because to me it's unfair.
Yes.
Everything that you talked about and said about rap artists, to me, it is a freedom of speech of how they're expressing themselves, and they're artists for a reason. And so some folks were unaware of certain lingos, which I can't think of the top of my head right now, but to me, it was a slippery slide to go down, because I'm going to be the person will tell the jury, hey, this is freedom of speech. This is unfair to hit a specific genre of music, a specific group of individuals based on what they're saying inside their music.
Right.
It's so unfair. And so we watched the video, and that's the reason why it's like sometimes, at the very end, people were asking, well, what does this mean? And what does that? And
what when he say he's spinning? What does that mean? Those things. Because, but what was interesting is that, again, Glanville let this in, but then there was a scenario where they brought Lil Uzi Vert's name up. And this was a argument between the state and the defense, because they alleged that, and again, here's something else. You guys had to deal with the traditional case, but then all this digital stuff that comes in. That's a whole nother topic. But in this particular time, we're dealing with Glanville letting it in, and Miss Love brings in the Lil Uzi Vert situation with Young Thug, where he said $5 million on your head, kid.
Oh yes, I remember that one. Yes. To me, I how do you prove that?
But they were wrong, because this wasn't a rap lyric. This was because Lil Uzi had a diamond
on his, and
planted into his head.
And I remember seeing that even before court, because that happened like a couple of years before that time, right?
Yes.
I think it actually got taken out. Somebody stole it.
Right. It was a big pink diamond, and so it went viral. And rappers do this thing to market themselves, which would also speak to some of the antics that you see.
Correct.
So this would lend itself, if they had it in the proper context, it would lend itself to the jury understanding, oh, rappers will do some wild stuff to get people talking. This
people
dude
talking.
planted a diamond into his head. So when Brian Steele comes up and basically tells the court and the jury that they were wrong about the Lil Uzi Vert thing, what was y'all position? Because I know you were already saying freedom of speech, protect this art. I'm not necessarily gonna corroborate the story based on the lyrics, but when they're wrong, does this get the other jurors who are on the fence about lyrics to say, oh, they're completely wrong?
Well, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
no longer getting down
Well,
with
you know, I think you have that because it could be a generational thing as well, where it's that some people feel like this is what they're saying. It sounds so bad, it's
Right.
horrible. But then it takes someone from a younger generation to explain this is what's going on.
Right.
You know, you have a battle between two artists, and like you said, it's marketing. I think that's what the defense had argued about. That hey, artists will do things to market themselves and also to start a battle to drive up sales because things are a little different now.
Yes.
You know, we look like I'm 39, so I
Right.
remember you had the cassette tape and you have CDs and other things like
Yes.
that. I mean, artists want to make money and
Yes.
sell. So I'm assuming that some of the jurors who were not connected to some of the lingo and why different artists were doing what they're doing, they needed to be a better understanding. They had to be told, okay, hey, this is what this is. This is what's going on. And then I think it did kind of change their perspective during our deliberation because we couldn't discuss it during the whole entire
That's
trial.
what's crazy too. It's like I sit next to you all day. I thought y'all can go chop it up.
Oh no! It would no. We were every day. We were told. I want to say admonition or I can't
Yeah,
remember
he
that.
said that. I've heard him say that at the end of the day. Yes, I
And
heard him
we
say that
could
every
not
day.
look at any social media accounts, and we couldn't look at the news if it had anything on it.
How hard was that?
It was hard. It was hard because I don't watch the news unless like a major event. Now, sometimes things will pop up, and I just kind of like I was pretty fair enough to be like, hey, I'm not doing it. But we could not talk about the case.
It's hard for me to believe, though. I mean, your family, your friends, they know you're part of this trial. Like, it's hard for me to believe that 100% of the people on that jury didn't see anything concerning that trial.
Well, if they did, though, we don't know anything about it.
Right. Yeah. No. And you shouldn't know anything about it. But
If they did, we don't know about it.
But I'm almost certain you agree with that because it's too hard, man. It's too hard.
Especially in local news and you see things.
Bro.
And it's a
And
high
then this is
profile
young.
case.
This is one of the highest of profiles.
It's the highest profile.
Yeah,
It's the highest profile
crazy.
case, and this case was going to determine a lot for a lot of artists moving forward.
Yes.
And so I believe that whatever happened in this case and what was presented will give either the state an opportunity, if something were to come up with a different artist, how to navigate through the system
Yes.
to render a verdict that's going to side with the state.
Yes. And I think for people who were culturally unaware of lyrics, because let's deal with these 2 points. You have one point where, again, you going out back in there to deliberate, and let's just say there's a jury with this one lyric written down. Like, I get what y'all saying about all that, but this one lyric right here, when he says, shoot at your mama, and she no longer mentioned me.
Yeah.
And that dude mama was shot.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to, how did you explain things like that?
Well, you have to like you said, like some artists will say things and they're lying about it. It doesn't mean that it's true. And you had to convince those who didn't understand. Well, this is what they say, especially the teachers.
Yes.
Like I said, we have 2 folks in there who are teachers, and we had one individual who kind of side with, because they have kids and gun violence and all the things, and they kind of feel separate way. But there were a couple of jurors who were able to pretty much explain this is what they're saying. But the common thing was freedom of speech, and this is an artist making a song that it might have fit what they want to get across, and then it's music as an artist to for folks who want to listen to their music, whatever. So we were able to navigate through it.
Yeah. And for me, it would have been, how bad do you think those jurors would have felt if they put Young Thug in jail for the rest of his life, right? Based on the lyrics. Of course, there was more evidence, but if the lyrics were the driving force and then they get out of that trial and bump into the Kendrick and Drake situation.
Correct.
In which you start to say, oh, the lyric thing is because he's calling him a pedophile and he's not really a pedophile, right?
Correct.
They even let it go on the Super Bowl.
Correct.
So you start to understand that lyrics don't hold as much weight as they did in that courtroom when you nailed this young man to the cross. That would have been wild.
Well, it would have been wild. That's the reason why, like, you know, you had to be very delicate, and that's how we were doing during deliberation, because I knew that if the foreman would have the previous person want to be the foreman, it would have bumped heads, and it would have been incidents like that.
Yes,
and
that's
is
scary.
It is definitely scary. And not saying that they wouldn't have been a good foreman about it, but it's the fact of just conversations on other subjects, it would have bumped heads with individuals who would have just been like, no, this is what he's saying, and they would have been adamant about it.
Right.
And so then, like you said, this whole beef with Drake and Kendrick, you leave out of the courtroom, and then now you're seeing it firsthand. This is what's going on. It's just like, okay, then my goal was not to make sure we were going to go by what was in that courtroom, and to be fair about it,
right,
and go on by what the state was presenting and what the defense was debunking,
right.
And so anything else outside of that, it was null and void. And
I bet Thug is happy that someone like you was in there. I'm almost certain he is, right? Because he needed, and that's why the lawyers fight for certain jurors. And no, we're not doing all those kind of people. Correct. Let's get some of these.
I'm just curious to know, which if both sides wanted me or one side. I mean, I'm just curious. I want to know.
Doug that. Yeah.
I always thought about that. I was like, well, did the state want me or did the defense want me? I don't know.
I bet you it was Brian Steele now.
I'm curious to this day, because I think that's like the icing on the cake, though.
Yeah,
because
I would wonder that's a good question.
Because I literally sat down and, as I mentioned before, District Attorney Love asked me questions, and I literally was saying, hey, I go by the facts, you're going by the questionnaire sheets. And then D. Williams asked me a softball question about horror movies, because I don't watch horror movies. I'm not a horror movie person.
I'm not paying you to scare me.
I'm not doing that. Is not my area.
Right.
And it was a softball question. And so then after all that, and even after this case, even in as you and I were talking, I'm just curious to know which attorneys wanted which juror.
Right. That is so funny. And they'll probably answer it based on this.
I hope so.
They're probably going to answer it, because I'm probably next, I'm going to try to do Brian Steele and Keith Adams, right? Those are two people that I want to sit with. And I got a relationship because Brian Steele, I spoke to him while the trial was going on, because I interviewed Rich Homie Quan.
Okay.
And they were going to use, before the passing RP Rich Homie Quan, they were going to use that interview to kind of show you guys the relationship between Thug and Rich Homie Quan wasn't as bad as they presented it. Let's talk about that. What was y'all feelings on some of these relationships? Because for all intents and purposes, the state was saying that, hey, there was a murder of Donovan Thomas. Donovan Thomas was connected to YFN Lucci and Rich Homie Quan. Young Thug and Rich Homie Quan had an issue that caused this whole problem.
Correct.
Did you guys buy any of that?
People probably bought into it early on, but that's when I go back into the not enough evidence, the inconsistencies. You want to, and rap artists do this, they beef back and forth, but at the same time, if something doesn't fit like a puzzle, you can't make it fit.
Right.
And so I believe that there are some jurors who were thinking that there was a beef or they were friends, and then this what took place in the state. I'll say give it to the state. They tried to
put that together.
Yeah. And like I said, I think Simone would have probably done a better job as probably making it fit. But in the District Attorney Love, I think just...
So you're saying the evidence was there, but Love just didn't...
Well, I won't say the evidence was there. I'll say that the story, how it was being presented. It's just how you deliver it. I think
timeline of it.
Timeline of it. And that's why, talk about presentation styles.
Right.
Because I argued about that towards the very end of the court case. It's just the fact that some things just have to make sense. You're going to tell a story and give us a blueprint. And that's one thing that Brian Steele did, is that he had a blueprint and he can dissect and tell you, hey, this doesn't make any sense. How can you be over here and this? And it just flowed. Whereas that the state tried to mingle things together and then let you go on your assumption, but then you go down into the reasonable doubt, and you can't say that this could have happened, but where's the proof?
Yes.
So
that was a mistake for them to always say, let the jury think what they want. It's
correct.
like, well, hold on now. Your job is to present a case.
Correct. You can't go on by an assumption.
Yes.
Because like then you could lock somebody up in jail
Forever.
for the rest of their life and ruin their whole entire life. And that's the reason why, like, go back to the education thing. When folks were signing their name on a dotted line, admitting to certain things, yeah, they might have, committed certain acts, but at the same time, the state owns them.